Okay, well, welcome everybody to the 2020 Massachusetts Youth Soccer Association's annual general meeting, our first virtual version. Unfortunately, the times have called for what's taking place, and we appreciate everybody's patience. But then on the other hand, I believe we had more people signed up for tonight's meeting than have attended the last 2 or 3 meetings combined. So we're glad to have the numbers and to see everybody that is joining us. We appreciate your time. Before we move into the meeting and the such, just want to spend 1 minute real quickly up front to say thank you to everybody. But at this point, would also like to recognize those that we have lost in the soccer community, and those that are also helping to fight the battle, all of our essential workers that are out there, from those working in hospitals, pharmacies, grocery stores, delivery, the mail service, USPS, you name it. We're just very, very appreciative of all of those in our soccer family that are essential workers that are helping to provide us the services that we need during these crazy times. And thank you for putting yourselves at risk so that we all may benefit from your hard work. So we appreciate that. And definitely a special call out to all of our first responders for everything that you do for us, putting yourself in harm's way. And lastly, I think it's important that you all understand that Mass Youth Soccer, in our Constitution, we have a statement of inclusivity. And that statement's very important to us. We live by it every day. And we want to make sure that our members are fully aware that Mass Youth Soccer does consider ourselves to be a fully inclusive association. And we do everything possible to make sure that all of our members, past, present, and future, feel comfortable, feel welcomed, and they know that Mass Youth Soccer is a friend. So I'd like to start with that. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the credential check, we've been asking you to please, put your name in. We're going to be basically doing the attendance based on the Zoom webinar registrations. We're going to match your name against the organization list. So when you filled out your registration to attend, you put a member organization. We also have the leadership report, the latest versions. So we're cross-referencing all of those at this time. And what we'll have as we move into the meeting, before we move forward with any business procedures, we will be looking for a quorum of 21 members. And I believe with the number of people that are attending right now, we have 104 in attendance. I don't think the quorum is going to be an issue as long as we have 21 representatives from member organizations who are eligible to cast votes. So we're looking pretty good there. Thank you. Next slide, please. So on-screen panelists, you have the pleasure of seeing your Mass Youth Soccer officers, an executive director, and a few others that will be on there. President Bob Trudeau, Executive Vice President David Amadon, our Treasurer Derek Smith, Secretary Karen Goulet, myself, Mike Borsler, your Executive Director, and helping to drive the slides and to steer us in the right direction. Also, he's going to be helping with the Q&A, the questions, is our moderator, but our Director of Marketing Communications is Rob Holliday. And then you'll see two names that are just appearing. They're not going to be on as panelists, but they're behind the scenes, is Tara Patrica and Lynn G. They're going to be helping with the tally of the credentials and providing that to the secretary for the credential report. Next slide, please. So to keep things kind of on pace and semi-orderly, what we're going to ask is to have all questions related to the AGM content submitted through the QA function. Some people have started to do that already, and we appreciate that. As you notice, there is no chat function on here, so everything's going to be done through the QA function. All the panelists, will be able to see your questions, and we'll be handling those throughout the meeting. What we're asking is that only questions pertaining to each subject matter of the meeting will be answered during that part of the meeting. So for example, when we're going through, let's say, the financial report, any questions with regards to the financial report will be addressed by Derek and any others on the board to assist him. But we won't be answering any questions during financials having to do with return to play or anything else at that time. So we're going to try and focus the questions having to match up with the agenda. So we would like if you can hold off on your questions until we get to that part. Once again, if you have submitted any questions throughout the meeting, we'll attempt to answer all those throughout. If not, we'll do it at the very end during the new business section. We'll attempt to address as many questions as possible. And just so you're aware, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Mass Youth Soccer website. Next slide, please. So at the end of the meeting, we typically will finish with new business and then go to the game. And so what we would like you to do if at this point is if you have any submissions for new business and or good of the game, please, you can type those in at any time you want. But when you type it in, please type in new business and or good of the game prior to your submission so that we can categorize it and make sure we get to it at the right time of the meeting. Thank you. And next slide. Okay, well, we're going to jump into the meeting before we have the president convene the meeting. Just a few housekeeping things, if we can go to the next slide. Here is the business agenda for today's the business meeting for today. I'll just have this up for a few seconds. This is also covered in the 2020 AGM report that was available on our website. And next slide, please. At the end of the AGM, after the AGM adjourns, we're going to be addressing some questions. Thank you very much to those who submitted some questions and some topics of discussion before, when you registered for the meeting. And they actually fell into three buckets. Primarily, everybody, of course, is interested in return to soccer activities and the US Soccer Connect membership management system, as well as some information about leagues. We will be covering these three topics in detail at the end of the official business meeting of the AGM. And I've several slides prepared for these. And as we all know, the governor did come out today with some more information about the return to play, return to youth sports, and I'll cover as much as I can in the return to soccer activities. And then we'll talk about the new membership, the new version of US Soccer Connect. And then we'll have some questions about leagues. So those will come at the end. So if you want to hold your questions on those topics until the end, that would be appreciated so that we can take a look at them at that time. And next slide, please. So I'm now going to turn the reins over to Bob Trudeau, the president of Mass Youth Soccer. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Massachusetts Youth Soccer Association 2020 Annual General Meeting. I will officially call the meeting to order at this point. As Mike said, we appreciate your attendance and participation in this important annual business meeting for the association. It is an overused description, but nonetheless an accurate one, that we live in unprecedented times. The COVID-19 virus has upended our lives at home and work and forced us away from participating in the sport we all love. At Mass Youth Soccer, we have no doubt that our decision in March to postpone this AGM meeting was in the best interest of everyone's health and safety. However, the dilemma we faced was determining when we could be able to reschedule an in-person meeting as required by our Constitution, given that the continuing restrictions on assemblage. Fortunately, Governor Baker and the state legislature has provided relief to nonprofits such as Mass Youth Soccer by allowing us to hold our membership meeting remotely. Hence, we are here tonight. While we await the confirmation of the credentials report, and before we dive into the core of the agenda, I'd like to take a few moments to recognize some of those statewide leadership attending the meeting. Next slide, please. This is our board of directors. In addition to myself, we have Executive Vice President David Amidon, Secretary Karen Goulet, and Treasurer Derek Smith as the 4 officers. Our at-large directors are Dave Bolos, Howie Blatt, Jeff Chambers, Janet Gargan, David Dalrymple, Stephanie McCardle, Thomas Ringler, Dana Santilli, Jared Scapacci, and Lucy Tarquino. I should also mention that Dana Santilli is the at-large director who was elected by the board to be a member of the executive committee along with the 4 officers. Next slide, please. These are our board non-voting members. Our immediate past president, Ted Ritchie, Sid Bloom, Nancy Hart, Ray Robinson, Steve Smoller, and Russ Wolf, who is the state youth referee administrator and a member of the Mass State Referee Committee. You will note that 3 of the members are Director Emeritus and also Mass Youth Soccer Hall of Fame members. Next slide, please. Our affiliated league leadership. Again, most, if not all of these leaders are on this list that are participating in the meeting tonight. I won't recite the list, rather allow you to read through it. This group of leaders comprises the Leagues Committee that meets regularly to collaborate on guidelines among our affiliated leagues. I should mention that during the COVID-19 crisis, the Leagues Committee, along with Mass Youth Soccer, has been holding virtual meetings almost weekly to exchange information and make decisions about when and how to safely return to play. Next slide, please. I'd also like to recognize our many sponsors and partners without whose support Mass Youth Soccer would find it difficult to provide services and benefits to our membership. For sponsors, Apex Entertainment, Coca-Cola, Dick's Sporting Goods, 4 Kicks, Ron Bouchard Auto Stores, and TD Bank. Next slide. For partners, Academy Soccer Coach, Din Brothers, New Balance, New England Revolution, Northeast Promotion and Apparel, Soccer Parenting Association, the Coaching Manual, and Top Deckers. Finally, I'd like to provide you with a brief summary of our state association's accomplishments for 2019. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. I believe many of you are familiar with these programs. Detailed annual reports for each program can be found on the AGM webpage. I'd like to share 2 brief highlights from this list. Our technical staff, Technical Director Ian Mulliner and his assistants Tommy Geist and Loya Bina, working with over 140 member organizations, continues to refine and improve the Director of Soccer Development program. This program provides the latest education and communication tools for player and coaches development and improving the soccer environment within your organization. If your organization hasn't registered and designated a Director of Soccer Development with this program yet, we urge you to do so. We believe you'll find it'll provide significant benefits to your soccer program. I'd also like to note that last year, the Genesis Referee Program, this was renamed from Grassroots Referee Program to Genesis Referee Program, a collaborative effort between Mass Youth Soccer and the Mass State Referee Committee, had 17 participants earn classroom waivers to become certified referees. A major objective of the program to help streamline the pathway for young referees to certification through the program participation and the mentorship they receive. Next slide, please. Our activities. A number of these actions have been mandated by federal legislation and the requirements of the Safe Sports platform. 2 brief points. The first bullet, the portable soccer pitch funded by an Innovate to Grow grant from the U.S. Soccer Federation, has been utilized to great success in promoting youth soccer in the state in urban and underserved communities. Our grant was one of 3 examples publicly cited at the U.S. Soccer Federation AGM in February as best-in-class creative concepts to grow the game. I'd also call your attention to the final bullet on the slide, the board decision to approve the field returf project at our Lancaster facility. Our initial plan was to complete this project during the fall of 2020. However, given the uncertainties of the current situation, the project may be deferred until our financial options have clearer definition. Next slide, please. We still have a number of active initiatives our board of directors and staff are pursuing. The governance and best practices initiative is gaining momentum. We have recently added a member toolkit to our website with helpful guidance for enhancing government documents for leagues and member organizations. I highly recommend that you check out the toolkit. The Futsal Development Initiative is a collaboration between our 2 affiliated youth futsal leagues and Mass Youth Soccer to promote and support the creation of futsal programs among leagues and member organizations. An offshoot of this initiative is that one of our board members, Director Jeff Chambers, was selected to participate in a U.S. Youth Soccer Futsal Committee, where he has been a significant contributor to the recreational futsal programming effort. Concerning the Stack Sports platform update, that will be covered in the post-AGM Q&A session. Next slide, please. So Karen, as secretary, are you ready with a credentials report? Or are you still waiting?
I'm still waiting, Bob. So if it's okay to delay, we'll hold off on the final numbers.
Okay.
I do know that we should be in good shape because an initial report showed that more than 24 member organizations were in attendance this evening. But for official numbers, if we could hold off one moment.
Okay, so why don't you break in when you have the official numbers?
Will do, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, Rob, please. The approval of the 2019 minutes, AGM minutes, I should say. These minutes were posted on our website and available for review. Having not received any questions or comments regarding the minutes, I believe that we can consider them as approved, as submitted, and move on. Next slide. Unfinished business. From review of those minutes, there was no unfinished business recorded at the 2019 AGM. So now we're on to the report of officers.
Bob, if I could interrupt you, I think we're now ready for credential report.
Okay.
Thanks so much. And so out of the 272, pardon me for a moment. Our total membership for Mass Youth represents 272 voting members, which includes organizations, lead, and board members. And by our constitution, attendance of 7.5% of those voting members, which is 21, represents a quorum. I'm very pleased to report that we have 27, and thus a quorum has officially been established for the 2020 AGM.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Karen. So we're at officer and program reports, which are also part of the AGM document package on our website. The reports have been posted on the website for a number of weeks, and they will continue to be available on the website for several more weeks after the meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, next we are at the review of the 2018-19 fiscal year report and the 2019-20 budget. These documents are also linked on the website. Our treasurer, Derek Smith, will provide a bit of detail from these reports, but we urge you all to read through them thoroughly if you haven't done so already. So Derek, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bob. If you would go to the next slide, please. Before I just talk about the bullet points, I just remind everybody that the 2018-19 financial statements were audited by Tonneson & Company, and they completed their audit earlier this year and gave us a clean opinion. That is included in the package that is on the website. Some highlights from 2018-19. We had revenues of about 4.41 million. Expenses before depreciation were 3.9 million. We had cash balances at the end of October 19 of 1.9 million. And our field complex debt was at 4.5 billion at the end of October 19. We make 2 payments a year, one in October and one in April. And our audited results were in compliance with bank covenants. So it was a very good and successful year. Next slide, please. Moving on to the budget for the current year that we're in. And again, I would ask you to move to the next slide, please. Remind you that this is for the budgeted year, November 1, 2019 through October 31, 2020. The budget was approved by the board of directors at our November meeting. Clearly, it was prepared before the impact of COVID-19. The budget anticipated revenues of about 4.6 million and expenses of 4.2 million. And by the end of October 2020, we will have brought the field complex debt down to about 4.2 million. And the budget, as was approved by the board of directors, satisfies our obligations to TD Bank. Happy to entertain any questions if there were any. There was one, I guess, that was posted with respect to the retirement of bank debt and bank interest compared to the revenues collected for field assessments. They were within 20,000 bucks. The provision of the original bylaw also included operating expenses for the field. Clearly, we spent more than $20,000 in maintaining the fields between fertilizing, aerating, and in the case of the turf fields, expenses to make sure the fields were safe to play on. So we have fully satisfied our obligation for the year. And should our expenses be less than the money, then we put that money into, as you know, there is a field replacement fund that had about 1.3 million in it at the end of October. So any surplus funds would move into that fund. Finally, I would say this is my last report as treasurer of Mass Youth Soccer. I've enjoyed my 8 years on the board. I thank everybody for their support and help. I'm particularly grateful to the staff, to Tara Patrica, to Mike, and all the others who've helped me throughout the 8 years. And I know you are in good hands with Thomas Ringler going forward. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Rob, could we move on to the next slide? Okay, the report of our executive director. Mike, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you very much. So appreciate everybody's attendance again. Actually, excuse me, for the sake of time, my executive report is submitted in the package that went out. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it and take a look at the comments about the importance of building soccer community. But for the purpose of tonight, I would like to spend the majority of my time at the very end of the meeting going over the 3 discussion topics that I talked about before we kicked off the meeting. So that's where I'll spend the bulk of my time. However, there is one part of my report that I feel is important to verbally share. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Basically, this part of my report is to recognize our staff that we have at Mass Youth Soccer. I've got several slides of the folks that are here to work on your behalf every day, weekends and nights. And we have probably some of the best people working at Mass Youth Soccer as compared to any other state. And we do a lot of interaction with states all over the country, especially the 10 largest states. We talk once a month, if not more often, given things of late. And they're often jealous of the incredible knowledge, experience, and work ethic that we have with our staff. Field crew over the last year, Dick Threadgold retired, and we handed over the reins to Otis Falvey, and he is assisted by Jay Kalecki, doing an incredible job with the fields, keeping them in good shape, so that when we do open up, the fields will be ready to go. New employee started in December, an Endicott College graduate, Jamie Balboni, has been with us in office support, and she's been very integral in helping us move a lot of our marketing efforts, supporting Rob in marketing in the social media pathway, as well as supporting a lot of our programs and efforts there. Lori Jimenez with our fields and hotels does the fields booking, has relationships with all the hotels, and this department has continued to be a rather successful and profitable side of the business. Lynn G, yep, I know I can't pronounce it correctly, so it's Lynn G, oversees our events and programs. As you all know, that Lynn's very integral to getting our annual workshop up and running, and she's done a phenomenal job with our past workshops, and we're planning on one that's even bigger and better coming up for next year in February. Maureen LaRocque oversees the TSL League, as well as supporting Lynn with ODP. They both work on ODP together, one of the most successful programs in New England. And Maureen oversees the TSL, a program that's just grown exponentially. Incredible success and some of the highest survey appreciation ratings that we get from any of the programs we run. Somebody that's important to all of us is Mary Relic. She oversees risk management and the query process. And she has, I think, is getting about 4 hours of sleep a night over the last several months as we're making the transition over to the new platform. And Mary's been doing some incredible work on those projects. Next slide, please. National championships are overseen for many years by Terry Filippetti. And under Terry's leadership, she has really strengthened the program. It's pretty much a program open to all soccer playing teams in the state. And we have got great representation at our state cups as they lead into national championships. Unfortunately, this year we did have to cancel the national championships, but we're gearing up for an even bigger and better year next year, and also taking a look at some different options that we can use for getting state cup accomplished in a different fashion, so we don't have to cancel it in the event things change in the future. You've had the pleasure of watching Rob Holliday on your screen, probably, our marketing and communications. Rob has just been very, very helpful with our social media presence, helping to promote the various programs we have, and as of recent, has had some huge success with our esports initiative that we've had over the wintertime with several hundred Mass Youth Soccer boys and girls playing the esports games throughout the winter and still going on. One of our longtime employees is Rachel Wu, overseeing registrations, helps handling the certificates of insurance. And also Rachel is a nationally recognized member of the U.S. Soccer Referee Committee. So she's representing Massachusetts, not only locally with registrations, but nationally on the referee side. Next slide. And then our technical department, headed up by Ian Moliner. Hopefully everybody that's on tonight's meeting has had a chance to meet Ian, whether it's at a meeting or one of our webinars or in person during a coaching course. But Ian is also nationally recognized by U.S. Soccer and United Soccer coaches. He is sought after to help author programs and courses, and he's a very important part of our technical department. Supporting Ian is Tammy Endow with the technical department. And over the last 6 months, Tammy has also undertaken some other endeavors, one of which is she has pretty much been the author with a lot of support behind our return to play guidelines that we'll review later on. We'll talk about later on. Supporting technical department, of course, you have Loy Urbina and Tommy Geis. They're there to help all of our members through the DSD program, coaching courses, coaching licenses, and the such, as well as helping to advise our member organizations on their soccer endeavors. And lastly, I definitely need to recognize Tara Petricka. She's our CFO as well as head of HR. She wears two hats. And as you can only imagine, as of late, with all the COVID-19 requirements for all businesses, Tara has just been hard at work making sure that Mass Youth Soccer, both at the office and the complex, is in compliance with all of the new regs that are coming out, dealing with all the issues having to do with training, education, posting of laws, policies, and procedures and such. So Tara has done an incredible job, as always, with those areas. So more or less, my report was, again, as submitted, but most importantly, my verbal report is just in full support of the incredible staff that Mass Youth Soccer has there to help you with your needs, with whatever help that you need when it comes to getting our children out onto the fields and playing the game of soccer. So that is my report. And next slide, please. And at this point, what I'd like to do is turn over the microphone to our selection of officers, and that would be Dave Amadon. Dave, are you on and available?
I am.
Great, super.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. I apologize for the static video on my end. I'm having a little technical challenge here, so, but I hope the audio is coming through fine. I'd like to add my thanks to all of you for your attendance tonight, and more importantly, for your strong continuing engagement to help our association remain one of, if not the preeminent youth soccer state associations in the U.S. At this 2020 AGM, I have the pleasure of walking us through the selection of 3 Class C directors, each for a 4-year term ending with our 2024 AGM, and the election of a new treasurer, also for a 4-year term, ending with our AGM in 2024. The candidates for these board positions have been submitted to and reviewed by a nominating committee to ensure that each candidate meets the eligibility requirements for service on our board, including assuring that those candidates being nominated have a significant history of prior service to youth soccer and are able to fulfill the duties of a director. I had the pleasure of serving on this year's nominating committee, and I'd like to thank the other committee members for the really great job they've done this year in presenting this slate of candidates. Derek Smith chaired the committee and is our outgoing treasurer. Matt Naventi from Berkshire County Youth Soccer League. Deb Perry, who's the registrar from Bridgewater Youth Soccer. And Danielle Osorio, the president from Methuen Youth Soccer. Okay, under our bylaws, Section 103.4 for the governance wonks out there. Candidates may self-nominate in advance of the AGM via a write-in and signatures process. No additional nominations have been received under that procedure. And just to be clear, there's no provision under our bylaws for additional nominations from the floor of this meeting, and no person can be eligible for selection to an office at the AGM unless nominated in one of the aforementioned two ways. Initially, we had 5 well-qualified individuals submit themselves for nomination. All were considered by the nominating committee and all were found to be exceptional candidates. Since then, 2 of the candidates, Tony Loftus and Alex McPherson, have withdrawn their names for consideration for this selection. Accordingly, the following is our current slate of candidates for selection as Class C directors. Howie Blatt, an incumbent director, Dave Bolos, an incumbent director, and David Dalrymple, an incumbent director. Typically, back in the old normal, we would now give each candidate a couple of minutes to address the membership. However, given the new and challenging circumstances and in the interests of time, instead, we've posted prior to this meeting the candidates' respective bios and candidacy submissions, so they are available for anyone interested. Under our governance rules, if there's no opposition, there is no need for a formal vote. Thus, Messrs. Blatt, Bolos, and Dalrymple are elected by acclamation of this meeting. Congratulations to each of them. And before turning to our election of the treasurer, I'd like to turn this back to Bob for a minute for a few words he has for our outgoing treasurer, Derek Smith. So Bob, back to you.
Okay, thank you, David. Just a couple of comments. When he was elected to the board of directors, I knew that Mass Youth had made a very good choice in selecting Derek Smith based on my experience working with him during my tenure as president of Essex County Youth Soccer. As treasurer in Essex, Derek came into the position when it was, and see if you can relate from your own experience, basically a bookkeeping function. His financial leadership, refined by years of experience as a CPA and a CFO for multiple major companies, led to a number of improvements in Essex financial policies and procedures. At Mass Youth Soccer, Derek applied the same approach, evaluating financial practices and recommending changes, upgrades, and improvements. Derek's expertise and professionalism in interactions with financial institutions and government agencies have conveyed a confidence to these organizations that Mass Youth Soccer has its financial house in order. Most invaluable has been Derek's dedicated mentorship and guidance to the Mass Youth Soccer staff, in particular, Executive Director Mike Borislow and Finance Director Tara Patrica. It's been said that a measure of a person's success is if they leave an organization in a better place than when they arrived. In Derek's case, as treasurer of Mass Youth Soccer, the unequivocal answer is yes. We are in a much better shape thanks to Derek's significant contributions to the association. So Derek, thank you for all your service and contributions. You will be very much missed by the board, and we wish you much success in your future endeavors. Rob's giving me, feel free to do virtual applause. I should mention, before I close, that had we been able to hold an in-person AGM, we had a parting gift to present to Derek. We will get that gift to you, Derek, in the near future when we can all get back together again. Thank you. Back to David.
Thanks, Bob. I'd like to echo what Bob said and personally thank Derek for the yeoman's work he's done over the years. It's unlikely Mass Youth Soccer would be in the position of national leadership on so many fronts without the strong business and financial guidance Derek's provided over his many years of service. Thanks, Derek, and we all know you're stepping down, but you're definitely not stepping away. For the election of treasurer, which is also a board position, Thomas Ringler, a current at-large director, is running unopposed. As above, under our governance rules, if there is no opposition, there is no need for a formal vote. So Mr. Ringler is elected by acclamation of this meeting. Congratulations, Thomas. And I'd like to thank all 4 candidates for their interest in serving the association, and I'll turn it back over to Bob.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, Rob. Okay, we are into new business. First, concerning new business, I'd like to make 2 comments in regards to this particular meeting. First, given this opportunity to hold a virtual membership meeting during the virus crisis, the Mass Youth Soccer Board is of the opinion that the association should codify the option of holding a membership meeting in the virtual format in our Constitution. So we are actively working on language of a constitutional amendment to be presented to the membership for consideration. Timing of a meeting on this matter is TBD. Secondly, to help us in planning and improvements with this type of meeting, tonight's participants should expect to receive a post-meeting survey requesting pros and cons based on their experience in the meeting. We'd appreciate your participation in the survey to help us better plan and make improvements in this type of meeting in the future. So Rob, do we have any submissions regarding new business?
There are no submissions for new business, Bob. Bob, you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please then. Okay, we're into the good of the game. Does anyone have anything they would like to say for the good of the game? Again, use the Q&A. If you're an attendee, use the Q&A function.
Bob, this is Karen.
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
I'd like to share with the membership something of significance similarly along the lines that you shared about Derek, and I'd like to add my special thanks to Derek as well, who's been an absolutely fabulous resource to the organization and its membership. Last month on May 1st, actually saw the retirement of yet another important resource to the sport and to the state and to the membership, Ray Robinson, who has always been he's been that dependable guy who has raised his hand to help players and parents and fans, friends, leagues, and towns for more than 40 years. He gave his voice to all members of the game, especially those who couldn't in his most recent years. Many of you may recall that Ray was the national chair for Top Soccer, USYS Top Soccer. He also was a local champion of the same, and he also was a participant on a national chair for children with disabilities. He chose to step down and retire these roles as of May 1st. And so on behalf of Mass Youth Soccer, and for those of the membership who may not have been aware, wanted to certainly share with you our momentous thanks for everything that he accomplished and did for our sport and for our organization.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing anything coming over Q&A. However, I did have one person that I would like to recognize, and that is Steve Robinson. For those of you that don't know Steve, he was the president of Northeast Soccer League, acronym NSL, formerly Maple. He was the president for a number of years. With the recent transition of the NSL to the New England division of the club's Champions League, the NSL has closed operations. I've gotten to know Steve pretty well over the past 6 years, and although we haven't always been on the same side of an issue, the discussions have always been cordial and respectful. While our opinions might differ, I know Steve's objectives have always been similar to my own, for the good of the game and for the children who play it. Steve and his wife Melanie have been hardworking members of the committee that runs the Massachusetts State Cup tournament for many years. I'm not sure that the tournament could run without their assistance. So I'd just like to take a moment and recognize Steve and thank him for his many years of service to youth soccer. All right, do we have any other good of the game comments? Rob, we don't see any?
No further submissions, Bob.
Okay. All right, so this brings us to the end of our business section of our meeting, and we are adjourned. However, please stay on the meeting as Mike will now address the pre-AGM question submissions. Thank you. All yours, Mike.
Okay. I need a little bit more than coffee for this, but it's coffee it is. So the three key topics that were brought up were return to soccer activities, adult registrations, and player data, and then leagues. So probably going to spend the most of our time on the first two, most likely the first one. I put together a series of slides on each of these subjects. At 12:05 today, we all received the Massachusetts Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs put out a follow-up to a order number 35 that was put out on Monday with regards to youth sports. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So return to soccer activities, or really return to youth sports for that matter. Got a few things that I'm going to cover here. Just before I go into it, there's a few things I'd like to share. Is that I will say that the group, the Reopening Massachusetts Youth Sport Task Force, of which I'm a part of, was caught a little off guard by some of the restrictions or limitations that were put out there, but we fully understand them and actually, quite frankly, we're fully supportive of them, in support of them, because number one, they're all focused on maintaining the health, safety, and well-being of the children of the state. And so, you know, some of you may see these as a hindrance, but quite frankly, anything that we can do to get our kids on a piece of grass kicking a ball is not a hindrance, it's a step in the right direction. So phase one, we will know on Saturday. The governor is going to let us know on Saturday when phase one expires and phase two begins. And it's either going to be on Monday, June 8th, or now we are hearing it could be anywhere between Monday of June 8th and thereafter. Once again, as we all hear the governor talk, it's based on statistics. It's based on the numbers. It's based on the trends. And the governor wants to feel comfortable that we're heading in the right direction before we start allowing people to congregate in greater fashions than are currently permitted. So phase two is called limited youth sport activities. And in phase two, there will be no games. We'll have no scrimmages, no friendlies, no tournaments during this phase. And this is for all youth sports. What activities are permitted is practices and skill development only. So our U.S. soccer practice, play model is going to be suitable, but with limited fashion. So we've come up with another solution to the play during this minimum 3-week period. there's no contact-based exercises as well during this phase. Next slide, please. So during phase 2, the way practices will be run is they're going to be limited to groups or cohorts. That's the term that was being used, even though when talking about children, really should probably refer to them as groups. Cohorts of 10. And the total of 10 includes coaches and players. So if you have one coach, you can have 9 players. You have 2 coaches, you can have 8 players. And you may have multiple cohorts per field as long as there's a 20-foot buffer zone. And that, for example, we could have 4 groups, 4 cohorts of 10 to a full-sized field with room for buffer zones. So if you take a full-size field and dice it into quadrants and then build in 20-foot buffer zones between end and touch and goal lines, we should be in pretty good shape to run practices. And the coach, but one of the things is the coach may not move from one group to another during a training session. So the group needs to remain consistent for that session. You can't start off with 5 or 10 kids in a group and split them 5 and 5 and crisscross over. They have to stay with that 10 group, those 10. And the purpose of that, of course, is to try and limit any potential, spread or contamination. So trying to keep the groups as consistent as possible is what's taking place there. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of things that are still being discussed. Social distancing by players. In the order that came out, or not the order, but the guidelines that came out today, it does state that participants must maintain social distancing. And then it also says, and there must be no contact. We're waiting to get some clarity on whether players in a sport need to maintain social distancing as long as there is no contact. Meaning that, for example, if you're doing a soccer exercise on defending and you want to try and teach the player the right technique on defending an attack, rather than showing them technique from 6 feet away, you'd like to show them anywhere from 3 to 6 feet. And so, but as long as there's no contact. So we're trying to get some more clarity there. And there was another question about the use of face coverings by players while engaged in activities. As long as everybody's social distancing, they don't have to wear face masks. So when players are out there social distancing in an exercise or a practice session, they don't have to wear a face mask. But if they are closer than 6 feet at any time during these sessions, they're going to possibly have to wear a mask. So we're going to get more clarity on that. But one thing I do want to point out is that a player may wear a mask at any time. The coach does not have the authority to tell a player to remove a mask, especially if we're playing no contact. Any type of mask should suffice, whether it's a neck gaiter that you pull up, the kind that goes around the ear, or one that ties totally around the head. Any mask will do since there is no contact during this phase. I know in a previous session of talking about this that we had expected this phase to actually permit players to play the sport the way it was meant to be played. But what's taken place is that youth sports is following the lead for youth camps and youth clinics and youth gatherings, which those policies came out yesterday. So childcare, youth camps, youth gatherings, youth parks and rec programs are pretty much leading the way, and youth sports are going to have to follow what's been set up as a precedence for those programs.
Mike, while we're still on phase 2, a couple of things to mention. One is our technical staff has put together physical distancing session plans, which are on the website. So that resource is already available for those of you who plan to go out and on the field with the players. Whilst some of these limitations may be in place, they can be found under coaches and then session plans under the heading physical distancing session plans. So we'll send a link out for those tomorrow.
Great.
We've got a couple of questions that came in.
Yep.
In addition, one from Mike. I'm not going to pronounce the second part, but Mike G. Is it the opinion of Mass Youth Soccer that, while not called out explicitly, tryouts are permitted as part of phase 2?
Okay, it's a great question. So first off, if you want to get some great ideas about tryouts, is to refer you to our coaching discussions that are being held, that are available. We do one that covered tryouts. So during this phase, a lot of organizations may not have full tryouts. They'll be moving their rosters from the spring to the fall, but they'll have to conduct assessments for certain players that they may want to move to a different category or to a different team. So during phase 2, assessments will be able to take place, as long as, once again, it's a total of 10 players and a coach as a cohort, as a group. That's the first. And then secondly, that there's no contact and trying to maintain that 6-foot distance. So there are various ways that you can conduct assessment for player skill that you can use as a part of your tryout process as where to play them. And that can take place during phase 2. Now, once again, in phase 2, if we go according to plan here, that phase 2 could actually end on June 29th. That's the earliest possible date. And then after that, and I'll touch on that in a second, what phase 3 may look like, is that there'll be hopefully an expansion of activities, soccer activities, so that if you do any assessments during the month of July into August, you'll have a lot more flexibility. So you may want to just try and plan accordingly if you're able to do that, because we also know right now that most municipalities, schools, parks and rec, DPWs who control the fields, it's highly unlikely that you'll be getting permits through June 29th as it is. So you may want to just plan accordingly to run your assessments during the phase 3 period.
Mike, one more question from Jay Brand. Is it required to document the names in a cohort pending the need for tracing? That's
a great question, Jay. The protocols are going to be provided to you. Actually, if we can go to the next slide, please, I can answer some of that here. So we are going to be providing guidelines that must be followed. Right now, it's not required that you maintain that list, but a recommendation is to keep track of the list. In the very unfortunate event that tracing needs to take place, that list will come in handy. Some of the sports have even considered keeping these cohorts as contiguous as possible from week to week to assist in any potential tracings. For those of you that are following camps and clinics, the requirement for camps, at least during phase 2, are going to be that these cohorts, these groups, remain the same for the entire period. And it very well could be that way for camps throughout the entire summer, that they are not allowed to change the 10 kids in a group for the entire time that their camp is in session. But for youth sports, they were silent on that, and thus we're treating it that you can mix your groups from from a Tuesday to a Thursday. The phase 2 Master Soccer guidelines, as I mentioned, are being developed. Tammy Yandel, with the support of much of our staff, has been putting this document together. This is going to be based on information from the CDC that we must follow, information from the Mass Department of Public Health that we must follow, information from the Reopen Massachusetts Task Force, of which a lot of that came out today in today's announcement, that will be included in our guidelines. U.S. Soccer's Play On, if you haven't checked that out, it's on their website. It's their standard guidelines at a very high-level global basis. U.S. Youth Soccer's Return to Soccer Activity Guidelines, of which Ian Mulliner sat on the committee that constructed those. and then some various other state association guidelines. Our guidelines are going to be, they could be, I think it's going to be an 8, 9, or 10-page document. Unfortunately, it's a lot of information that needs to be followed, and it's going to be there to help you through the process. You're going to need to become all members of our association to read and educate yourselves on these guidelines. There's actually even some talk that we may even need to certify that anybody who's interacting with children in youth sports be educated on COVID-19, just the same way we require concussion education training. That's not on the tape. It's not signed off or agreed to yet, but there have been discussions in that area. So expect more. And the other thing about guidelines I want to make sure you all understand is local, city, town, municipality guidelines must be followed. I've been sitting in on some city calls around the state as they've had their Department of Rec and as well as the Department of Health for various towns and cities, entertaining calls with representatives from all youth sports. And there are some towns that may be more stricter than what the governor comes out with. A prime example of that is already the city of Boston has had stricter guidelines than what the governor has put out for return to work. So the same thing, you could expect the same thing possibly for return to play. So there will be some stricter guidelines. Another important thing about the guidelines as we start to finish them up, our goal is to have them definitely done by hopefully through the weekend, is that you will need, most of you will be required to provide our guidelines to your Department of Rec, your Department of Recs, Parks and Rec, school superintendent, whoever you get your fields from, may be asking, and it's highly likely that they'll want to see what are XYZ soccer organizations, vis-a-vis Mass Youth Soccer's guidelines that they will be following. And these will be basically there for you to turn over to these municipalities, these organizations, for you to get permission to get permits. So that's we're going to most likely moving in that direction. In addition, we're going to be updating the certificate of insurance request process so that when you submit for a certificate of insurance for fields, you will need to attest that you have read and you understand the Mass Youth Soccer guidelines to the return for soccer activities as it relates to making sure that we are COVID-19 compliant with everything that we do. Next slide, please. Phase 3, to be determined. You know what? I made our group made some predictions about what phase 2 would look like, and we got caught off guard. We thought we were going to have a larger number of kids to a playing surface, and we also thought that there would be play the sport the way it was meant to be played. And evidently, there was a change of mind from people that have more important jobs at the State House than I do, and so we came out with phase 2 the way it is. Thus, we can't really make any predictions about phase 3 other than it will be a lot more lenient than phase 2. We can only assume that the 10 limitation may go up to 25. Based on some of the other things we've seen for where they're going to be permitting gatherings of people that will probably be closer than 6 feet in phase 3, is that we'll be able to have contact sports played the way they were meant to be played. Games look to be definitely a solid part of phase 3. And then tournaments may be phase 3 or late phase 3 or not until phase 4. So that's some of the things that we're looking at. All we can hope is that the numbers go down. Everybody follows the policy, rules, and procedures and guidelines. We keep our social distancing. We wear PPE when we must. We follow the protocols so that we can all contribute to basically to bending the curve spread lower and lower. Right now, you take a look at the infection to test rate has been dropping, and that's the numbers they like to see. And so we're doing everything possible to go in that direction. We have a question here. I say, Rob, is can the return to soccer guidelines be an appendix to insurance waiver we give to schools and parks and rec, not waiting for requests? That's a great question. I would recommend that when you do go for a permit, that you show them our guidelines, whether they ask for it or not. It demonstrates that Mass Youth Soccer is being very proactive on how we're going to deal with these situations, and the stance that we're going to take as we move forward to protecting, not only our children but all participants in youth sports. Parents, the guidelines for parents in phase 2 are going to be social distancing guidelines. When the guidelines come out, as I said, there'll be guidelines for coaches, guidelines for organizers, guidelines for parents, guidelines for players, guidelines for facility owners. And so you'll see that what they are. But yes, phase 2 will be social distancing. What they would like is that since it's not games, there's no reason to have spectators. And so that they keep it to one parent, or what they're referring to as a chaperone, per child at a practice. And then when they get there, they must have their PPE on, their face mask, face covering, as they exit the car, go to the field. Once they sit down in their seat and they're 6 feet away from others, they can take the mask off. But the second they get up and they have the propensity to be within 6 feet of somebody, the mask should be put back on. Has a decision been made regarding MICE insurance coverage for volunteer coaches? So that's a great question, and I addressed this when I had the open discussion several weeks back. So the Mass Youth Soccer insurance policies basically work this way: is that we have an excess medical policy. Actually, the name of that policy is excess accident policy. The policy that we've always had for years that covers any out-of-pocket expenses from after deductible, any out-of-pocket expenses for most injuries has to do with accidents. It's never included illnesses. And this has come up in several parts all over the country, having to do with Lyme disease, triple E, and actually the flu, and that our excess medical is excess accident policy. It doesn't cover illness. So then the other insurance that would be in place, that if a parent feels that their child contracted COVID-19 at a Mass Youth Soccer sanctioned event, then they have the ability to take legal action against Mass Youth Soccer. And that's where our liability policy comes into play. Between our base policy and our umbrella or excess liability policy, we have about $12 million worth of coverage in the event a parent sues, and the process is basically going to be that their lawyer is going to need to go through the process of verifying that they did in fact contract COVID while at a soccer event. That's beyond for what I can speak anymore about. That's up to the lawyers and the insurance companies to deal with. But all of our members in good standing are under that $12 million worth of liability coverage that we have in place in the event that we are challenged and sued. Modified DSP training only may be considered for smaller groups in phase 2. District Select program actually takes place starting the weekend after July 4th week, or the July 4th holiday, and into August. And our aim, or our desire, our goal is that, for the state, is that we'll be in phase 3 by that point. And so if we are able to approach phase 3 prior to July 6th or 7th, that we could have a District Select program in place, along with other programming that we can offer in Lancaster during the summer months that would include scheduled games. And next slide, please. So this was a short version. There will be a dedicated webinar because you will have a lot more questions as you start to digest this, especially when we get our guidelines out. We're going to have a dedicated webinar scheduled for next week from today, June 10th at 7 p.m., using pretty much the same format as we're using tonight. And so please put that down. An announcement will be sent out via email to the members listed in our leadership report, and then they can spread the word, and that'll be open to anybody and everybody, organizational leaders, league leaders, coaches, and the such. So we welcome everybody to attend that webinar next week on June 10th. Before we move on to adult registration, just want to, any last questions with regards to return to soccer activities, please go ahead and QA them in. I'll give your fingers another 15 seconds. All right, if they do come in, we'll just wrap up and answer whatever's outstanding. So adult registration player data uploads, I'm not going to spend too much time on this other than this was a question several people asked as to what the heck's going on with this system. And we ask ourselves that question every day at Mass Youth. But I'll give you those that are new to the situation a little bit of a backdrop here. It's what I call back to the future. 2016, we introduced Affinity as the program to help us manage the adult credential process. So in essence, an adult could not get their credential to be on the field of play or around our children until they had a background check done, and we were using Affinity to manage that process. And then as we approached into 2019, some newer technologies were shown to us. And so we took a look at where we were with Affinity. We took a look at what was taking place out on the marketplace and decided to go with Stack Sports US Soccer Connect system, which is the system that Stack Sports built for US Soccer to help them manage their player registrations at the highest level. So we started with them last fall, and then just about that time, we got hit with the Safe Sport requirements to all of our adults need to take safe sport abuse prevention training. And so that as US Soccer Connect was trying to understand our query process, and then at the same time, understand how they could manage the safe sport process for credentialing, it was a nightmare. Plain and simple, it was a nightmare. They had difficult delivering. And unfortunately, they got everything fixed and we were ready to rock and roll with 2020. Organizations were going to be able to get on, print out credentials in the last year's version of US Soccer Connect, and then COVID-19 hit. Just about the same time that all this started is Stack Sports realized that in order for them to truly get the job done, they just might as well buy the competitor Affinity, and that's what they did. Affinity was sold to Dick's Sporting Goods in 2017, and then Stack Sports purchased Affinity from Dick's in 2019. And so what we're referring to, the system that we were on last fall and we're supposed to be on this spring, we're calling it the legacy system. So starting with this coming fall, we'll be on the new Stack Sports US Soccer Connect platform, also being referred to as Sports Connect, and it's based on the Affinity platform. The introduction and training will start on June 15th. So starting June 15th, we're going to open up the system and we're going to prepare the system for adult registrations and player uploads. And we'll be doing is, I'll touch on training in a second, but that's when we'll commence with the new system. I know it's just about the same time return to sport activity starts, but it's different audiences, and we feel that we can start both at the same time. Next slide, please. So adult registration is open June 15th. For those who had a previous account in Affinity, so if you go back a year and you were in the Affinity system from 2017 to first part of 2019, your username and password is the same. Now, if you forgot it, use the forgot password function and don't create a new account. Otherwise, you end up with a duplicate account and lots of fun stuff happens. So please just re-log in. If you haven't established one, then you can set up a brand new account. One of the nice things is that we're back to the single URL login. We don't have to have a separate login for every member organization. There's no more separate club agreements. That stuff has all been pushed away, and we know it was painful for a lot of people. And so as a part of staying on the platform with Affinity, it's moved us back to where we were. So it's a much easier process for login and such. Mary has been working really long hours on getting as much data migrated from the legacy US Soccer Connect system that you all tried so hard to get onto and into the new system. We're able to grab a fair amount of data, people's query expiration dates, background expiration dates, and such, and as well as some of the other compliance. But one of the nice things about the compliance in the new system is that it will manage all the compliance aspects. So Affinity has definitely upgraded their system from when we left them. A lot of new functionality having to do with the Safe Sport connectivity, as well as connectivity to the Learning Center from US Soccer. And so the process will be a single annual registration process. We'll determine if your background check or query needs to be run, if it's expiring in the next soccer year. And then we'll run that and update the system. Safe Sport, if you've taken Safe Sport, the system does almost an instantaneous check against the Safe Sport database for those people that have taken the abuse prevention training course. So if you've taken the abuse prevention training course, your name and email address from Safe Sport match up against the one being used in US Soccer Connect, it'll be automatically populate your status of where you stand with your Safe Sport training. And then concussion at this point is going to be just uploading the concussion certificate, having the risk manager visualize it, check that they've seen it. And then as long as you've got all that taken care of, your credential will print out. So there's it. Do the Stack Sport user accounting logins for the past 12 months migrate? So the last 12 months, if you were on the legacy system for the past 12 months and not previously on the old Affinity system, you'll need to create a new account. And then your data should be, any migrated data will be located and updated. Now, if we go to the next slide, a lot of what I'm talking about will be covered in our training and resources that will be available. Excuse me. There will be website resources. There will be self-directed learning lesson plans so that, how do I, this is for administrators, by the way, how do I print out a credential? There'll be a lesson for that. How do I run a report? A lesson for that with all of the resources necessary. From the coach's perspective, your user interface is going to be so much nicer to see. You'll be able to see what your status is with regards to where you stand with the criteria, and it'll be real simple from the administrative standpoint. The tools are going to be much easier to use. We're going to have webinars walking people through this, as well as consultations as needed. If for some reason the Safe Sport doesn't pick up the coach, if they have their certificate and if the Safe Sport doesn't pick up, they can upload their certificate and the system will do a technology term, a QRC read of it, whatever that does, and it'll read it, and then it'll update your record to reflect that, yes, you're Safe Sport compliant. That was one of the questions we just got. Any further questions about adult registration, player data uploads, or the such? And once again, after June 15th, we're going to have dedicated web pages all about the system, tools for risk managers and registrars, and webinars just to try and make it as easy to use as possible. We took a look. We believe that 70% of our risk managers and registrars used the old system 2 years ago, and thus back to the future. You'll be going back to a system that's going to take us off to the future. So our new credentials using same, yes, they are. They're using the same lanyards, and they're also using, and they'll be printing out in the same dimensions to go into a lanyard, and lanyards can be ordered. We're taking a look at some options and alternatives to lanyards. So if anybody out there has some rather ingenious ideas that maintains the credence of a lanyard, of wearing a credential, so parents can see that the coach, in fact, has passed all of the requirements. Without doing a lanyard or such, please get your ideas into us. We're looking on ways to constantly improve the process and the methodology. So please make sure you share any ideas with us. Okay. Rob, before I move on, there was a previous question having to do with going back to return to soccer activities. I saw that.
Yes, Caroline Fiscato asked, will you have any trainings for coaches to help them prepare with mental health and trauma challenges post that they may have, and parents and players may also have as they return to play? So I did provide some information on our coaching conversation next week with Howie Blatt. I can go into some further detail on that for you. Howie Blatt is a licensed independent clinical social worker. He and Jamie Nikopoulos, who's a licensed school adjustment counselor, are going to cover a review of helpful, relevant developmental and mental behavioral health considerations for the youth coach to be aware of as we try to return to play post the pandemic. So having known Howie for a very, very long time, we're really excited to offer this opportunity. Again, all of the information is available on the Coaching Conversations webpage, but we'll be promoting this heavily over the next week or so as well. In addition, we also have a webinar scheduled with Dr. Julie Hubbard to provide a physical perspective for return to play in regards to injury prevention as well.
Great, thank you very much. Couldn't have said it better myself. So, and I appreciate that. By the way, I highly recommend that everybody, whether you're an administrator or a coach or such, try and get on for that Coaching Conversations session that Howie and will be leading, and you'll find it to be very, very beneficial for sure. And last slide, please, or next slide. There were some questions just with regards to league structure and league makeup. And I just want to give a quick overview of what's taking place in the league world. I'll try and keep this as simple as possible. First, our town-based leagues are residency-based. Those are the 10 leagues that have historically made up the MTOC leagues group. In order to play in an MTOC league, you must play in a town of which you're a resident. Now, there are a few exceptions and exclusions for a very small number of people, but for the most part, it's residency-based. So that is the town-based league system that we have. And they, and of course, they, as Bob mentioned, they meet monthly on a leagues committee meeting. And as of recently, it's been almost every weekend to talk about how to deal with the pandemic and what to do from a league perspective with schedules, with operations and the such. And so a well-working group. Also, as a part of the leagues committee, are representation from the open club-based leagues. And when we say open clubs, they're open to all. It's not residency-based. And so the two primary leagues that we have that are Mass Youth Soccer affiliated and sanctioned is the CCLNE, formerly the NSL, previously Maple, and they're an active member of Mass Youth Soccer's Open Club Leagues, and they have representation at the Leagues Committee meeting as well, and they provide play for all any club that would like to put a team into their system is definitely eligible to do that, no matter what level that club plays in. In addition to that, we have the New England Club Soccer League, newly sanctioned affiliated league that is just getting up and running, and they too are open to teams from clubs within the state. Both of these leagues also have many town programs that have club components or club sections that play in these leagues. So there are, I think there's a total of 15 towns in our state that actually have club components that actively participate in the open leagues. And then other open leagues in the state, the other USYS National Affiliated League is the EDP League. EDP does have some teams from Massachusetts participating, or at least did last year. But primarily EDP does a lot. Most of their league play takes place in Connecticut and not up in Massachusetts or the other New England states at this time. And then affiliated with US Club is the New England Premiership. So those are the open club-based leagues that are out there. And then the term and the questions came up with regards to multiple rostering is that we do permit multiple rostering, even though we don't have any jurisdiction over the NEP. As sanctioned leagues of the NECL and the CCL&E, as sanctioned leagues of Mass Youth Soccer, they are fully aware of what the multiple rostering is. And so children that play for a town-based system can also register and play in an open club-based program or league. So they can play on 2 teams. We do everything possible working with the various leagues that are sanctioned in Massachusetts to try and minimize conflicts of games. So whereas child may have games on a Saturday and other games on a Sunday, the one area where there tend to be conflicts, and historically always will be at the high school age or the U15 and higher, where those open leagues and town-based leagues play those games on Sundays. And so for many years, we did not permit multiple rostering at high school, but we currently do. And so if a player is able to figure it out, how they can play both on their town-based high school age team as well as a club-based U15 or higher team, they are surely permitted to do so. And so let me see, we have a question coming in. See if I can take a look at this. So question came in about the play on Saturdays. Fully aware that the EDP has historically held games on Saturdays because they play in Connecticut, and the Connecticut Youth Soccer, or Connecticut Junior Soccer Association, as they're known, has a different schedule than our state does when it comes to Saturday play. So when the EDP was running down there, my understanding is that teams that currently play in the EDP, they're able to put those teams in the CCL&E or the NECSL, and if they do so, that the programming for Massachusetts-based play is working with these two will be on Sundays and play on Sundays as much as possible, unless, of course, we run into situations with reschedules because of weather or other factors. And lastly, any more questions about leagues? So seeing none, it's now 8:37. And so we appreciate your time, but before I go, I have to definitely put the plug in for our coaching conversations. For those of you that have not attended one of these, it's up on our website under coaching. You'll see, Master Soccer. You go to coaching, you go to coaching conversations. You'll see the schedule. You'll see you have the ability to register. There are interactive sessions, lots of Q&A, as well as use of breakout rooms on some of the technical staff-driven sessions. The feedback that we've gotten from everybody that's attended these, and I've been on 4 or 5 of these myself, it's very, very positive. So please promote these to your coaches, because we will be out on the fields soon. So please promote the upcoming sessions. In addition, when you do go to the website, you will see the recordings of all the previous sessions. So if you're tired of watching Netflix, then go and binge watch coaching conversations. I think you'll find them to be useful, maybe a chuckle here and there, but for the most part, it's some great content, and we know that you'll you'll learn something for sure. So please take advantage of that. And if you're not a coach, please spread the word for sure. Our coaches have been working steadfast on providing continuous programming. And quite frankly, we think we've discovered something that's really working nicely, that these will be continuous as we enter our new normal, for sure. So there's coaching conversations. But beyond that, if you have any other further questions, definitely email myself up at the state office. And we just want to once again just wish everybody good health, be safe, and do everything possible to help us, come out of this phase of our lives being better than who we were going into it. And in so many different ways that we can come out of this phase of being much better people. So we appreciate everything that you do, and I would be remiss if I did not finish up with basically the sign off from Ian Mulliner for all of our coaching conversations and sessions, and that sign off is, please everybody, wash your hands. Thank you very much. Bob, closing comments?
Thanks, Mike. And I just want to thank everyone for participating in tonight's meeting. Reminder to our board members that we will take a 5-minute break and reconvene on the other soccer Zoom link. Appreciate that. Again, everyone stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you on the field soon. Thank you, and good night.